Good morning. My name is Jennifer Hill, and I am the Commissioner of Minnesota Housing, and I am so delighted to be with all of you today. I was just remembering in the car on the way down that in May of 2010, I was the Deputy Director of the U.S. Interagency Council on Homelessness, and we had worked with communities across the country and federal agencies to draft Opening Doors, the first ever federal strategic plan to prevent end homelessness. And we were on our way to a meeting in the Roosevelt Room of the White House, where we were going to have a conversation with members of the cabinet and members of President Obama's team to talk about whether or not we could be bold enough to say that it was possible to prevent end homelessness, and that we could do it for finishing the job for people experiencing chronic homelessness, do it for veterans, do it for families and youth, and set a path to ending all forms of homelessness. And we were really anxious walking into that meeting. We were worried that people were going to say, we got to focus one place at a time, we can't do it all at once. And that maybe the folks that were fighting to end veterans homelessness were going to try to only hold that lane. And that the folks that had been working so hard on ending chronic homelessness were going to try to only hold that lane. And what was amazing to me as I sat there in the White House in that conversation is I watched these people who sat as secretaries in cabinet, who reported directly to the president, make the case to one another about why we can do it all. And so to be able to come home and do this job here, and to be here in a community in Minnesota that's showing that we can do this, and we can do more than one thing, that we can work on all of this, it's just so incredibly moving. And so thank you for being here today. Thank you for the incredible work and the leadership that you provided in this community. I am so proud right now to be a Minnesotan. And with that, I want to turn it over to my good friend from HUD, Michelle Smith.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
I too am so excited to be here this morning to help make this very important announcement. I'm here on behalf of HUD Secretary Ben Carson and also Regional Administrator Joseph Galvin. Thank you, Commissioner Ho, for the introduction, and to all of our other distinguished guests, in particular Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan, Speaker of the Minnesota House of Representatives Melissa Hortman, and Minnesota Department of Human Services Commissioner Tony Laurie, and then, of course, Justin Vorbach, the COC coordinator here in Southwest Minnesota. Not having a home for a day or a week or 2 weeks is a horrible thing. But when we think about not having a place to sleep for over a year, or for maybe 4 times during the course of 3 years, all the while struggling with some sort of disabling conditioning, that is what HUD calls chronic homelessness. And to eliminate chronic homelessness is truly a challenge. These are the people within the homeless population that really have the largest supportive services needs to address those complicated issues that led to them living on the streets for such a long time. Some who work in this field say that it's impossible to eradicate chronic homelessness. But I'm here to tell you today that in Minnesota, we know it's not impossible, because the Southwest Minnesota Continuum of Care has just ended chronic homelessness here in this region. So how did the Southwest Minnesota Continuum of Care become only the 4th continuum in the entire country to eliminate chronic homelessness? I know that Justin will be talking about this later, but one reason is that they use research-based strategies to tackle the problem. And by the way, these are the same strategies that HUD is always promoting. A coincidence? I don't think so. So they implemented and utilized a homeless management information system and also an effective coordinated entry system. And they followed a housing-first strategy for helping people off the street. That and a lot of hard work on the part of the COC membership And support from other partners like the state of Minnesota brings us where we are today. I'd like to make a particular shout out to the case managers who have worked so closely. We have Jeannie Anthony here today, who is one of the case managers who has done such an incredible job in helping the Continuum reach this goal, and that in the next month, she's going to be retiring, and I wanted to make sure everybody recognized her. So in saying that the Southwest Continuum of Care has eliminated chronic homelessness does not mean that someday another chronically homeless person might be identified here in the region. What it does say is that if that were to occur, because the Southwest Continuum of Care has built the necessary structures and systems, that person would receive the supports they need in order to quickly obtain permanent housing. While we celebrate the success here in Southwest Minnesota, clearly our work is far from over. The recent study published by Wilder Research shows that homelessness here in Minnesota has actually risen 10% since 2015. My hope here today is that we can use the success of the Southwest Continuum of Care as inspiration to continue to address homelessness here in Minnesota. We can and we must keep this momentum going by continuing to partner together, strategize, and implement our joint initiatives as we strive to effectively end all forms of homelessness. I have brought with me today 2 copies of a proclamation signed by Regional Administrator Joseph Galvin, and I would like to present Lieutenant Governor Flanagan and Southwest Continuum of Care Coordinator Justin Vorbach with these proclamations. Please come on up. I'd like to read them first here. Proclamation. Now, wherefore, on behalf of the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development and as Chairman of the Midwest Interagency Council on Homelessness, I, Joseph P. Galvin, HUD Midwest Regional Administrator, hereby proclaims that the Southwest Minnesota Continuum of Care has effectively ended chronic homelessness. Whereas we are confident that the infrastructure and systems you have built will sustain this remarkable achievement. Whereas chronic homelessness in your continuum of care is prevented whenever possible. Whereas should a resident experience chronic homelessness in the future, they will obtain necessary support to quickly be placed in a permanent home, making said experience rare, brief, and non-recurring. Thank you for your commitment to ending chronic homelessness. Your leadership has been instrumental as we work collaboratively to end chronic homelessness as we know it. Thank you so much. Woo! Do we want to step up in front here?
Where are we looking?
So I'll just speak briefly. First, I'll start with a quote that I think is relevant from Joseph Campbell. He says, "This is the threat to our life. We all face it. We all operate in our society in relation to a system. Now, is the system going to eat you up and relieve you of your humanity, or are you going to use the system for human purposes?" So, The people who made this happen, the Southwestern Minnesota Opportunity Council, the Southwestern Mental Health Center, Scott Johnson, Brenda, Julie, Charlotte, the Housing Partnership, the over 25-year commitment of Rick Goodeman, who maybe more than anyone helped make this happen, and we're glad Carol is here today. Lisa Graffentine, Christy Blankenship, Jennifer Krenz, who started the Continuum with Lisa about 12 years ago, the Worthington HRA, Randy and Deb from the HRA, United Community Action, Angela, Jeannie, Michelle, Heather, Samira, Koo, Shelly, Nancy, and then Jean and Sarah, and Rochelle, and Katie, Jean, and Brenda, and Cheryl Baum. Prairie 5, Kayla Coyer, Lutheran Social Service Youth Programs, Angie Mateski, the Ojai County HRA, Gwen, Nikki, Jill, who are here. The Adult Mental Health Consortium, Craig Flatabo, Cindy, and Kim, who's here. Kim is the Executive Director. The Salvation Army, Ron and Wilmer, and Kim Schwick, who covers our other counties. The community-based shelter programs, Family Promise of Ojai County, which operates a church shelter of the week, and 14 churches participate in that. The Homes Program in Hutchinson, the Meeker Area Ministries, the Victim Service Providers, Safe Avenues in Wilmer, Jen and her team, McLeod Alliance for Victims of Domestic Violence in Hutchinson, and Rhonda and her team. Here in Marshall, Women's Rural Advocacy Program, Becky, who's here, is their director, and Safe Southwest Crisis Center, Sarah and her team. People at State Minnesota Housing, G, Joel, Vicky, Diane, Mary Tinkerfall.
There's 250 of us.
Commissioner Ho. DHS, Francie, Isaac, Tom, Andrea, Caitlin, Jane, Pat, Jeremy, John Petroskas, Christine Davis. Our database, statewide database group, Institute for Community Alliance, Dimitri and Carrie, our local administrator. The Minnesota Coalition for the Homeless, Senta and her team, who does legislative advocacy. Kirsten, Eden, Matt are here too. The Office to Prevent and End Homelessness, Kathy Tenbrook, Eric Rumbaugh, Leo. The HUD Special Needs Assistance Programs, and the Minnesota Field Office, Michelle, Marcia, and our representative Jackie. The U.S. Interagency Council on Homelessness, Matt. And finally, the people we serve, who have dealt with things that I know would have broken me, and who didn't lose hope. So thank you, and I'll turn it over to the Lieutenant Governor.
Well, what an incredible day, and we are so excited to be here. Thank you. First of all, this community has done something absolutely remarkable. You have come together in new and meaningful ways with the belief that housing is the foundation for success in every person's life. And I tell this story a lot, but it is important to tell it every single time we talk about issues of homelessness. My family moved to the community of St. Louis Park when I was just a baby, and my mom had a Section 8 housing voucher. And that provided a strong foundation for my family, for our development. And so when we talk about these issues of housing and homelessness, I take it very, very personally. And I'm so grateful for the work that you do every single day. You created new housing opportunities and rapidly targeted those opportunities to people in community who are both experiencing homelessness and living with disabling conditions. You've created a sustainable way to continue to do this work on behalf of people. You are only the 4th community in the country to arrive at this incredible accomplishment. And so this is a little hard for us to do as Minnesotans, right? Because we have a hard time talking about the good work, but I'm gonna say that again and then you all are going to cheer, okay? So you are only the 4th community to accomplish this in the country. I know that's really hard to do. And you've accomplished this in a geographic region of the state where physically coming together is not always easy. You have worked to solve this crisis for people who have the added challenge of vast distances to travel. So again, thank you. We know that many, many people make this kind of moment possible. As the long list of partners was read by Justin. I know recently, though, that you lost one of your biggest champions in Rick Goodman. And we are grateful to him and his vision and his creativity, his servant leadership to create thousands of housing opportunities for people experiencing homelessness throughout his career, and he will never be forgotten. We know the solution to chronic homelessness is supportive housing. Thank you to our team at Minnesota Housing for incentivizing our state housing dollars to be used to house people who have been homeless the longest. And most importantly, thank you to this community of partners and your belief and action to ensure that housing comes first and then supports are available to sustain that housing. This is what has set you apart and why you have reached this incredible milestone. We also know that there's a very high bar a community needs to reach to show that they have created a sustainable system to end and maintain an end to chronic homelessness. This is not an aspirational goal, but rather something that is precise and measurable. Finally, I know this kind of success is not new to you because you ended veteran homelessness in this region in 2017 and you are sustaining that result. And I have to say, Governor Walz, this is a priority for him and he wanted to just express his greatest just thanks and gratitude, but in particular on this issue of veterans homelessness, this is a milestone that we have set for ourselves to also end this across the state. You are leading the way and we are listening and learning from you and we will apply what we are learning to every part of our state. I also wanted to congratulate Jeannie on your retirement. Good work. Not everybody gets to retire after this kind of milestone, so congratulations. And thank you for your good work. I wanted to also recognize John DeKramer, who's the board chair of MHFA. So thank you for traveling long distances to make sure that Commissioner Ho and the entire team has your good support and leadership. We appreciate you. And then finally, I want to also recognize Representative Chris Swedinski, who is also here and is a critical partner for making sure that this kind of work is invested in and that we can sustain it for the long term. So thank you for your leadership and being here. I'm going to ask that we're going to have a conversation. We want to hear from you. It'll be less of us talking and more learning from each of you. So if we could just go ahead and go down the line, if folks could just introduce themselves, that would be great. We have that mic. The mic's a little touchy.
It's a very live mic.
It's very live. Just go ahead and introduce yourselves and we'll get started.
Right, Jennifer Ho, Commissioner, Minnesota Housing.
I'm Tony Laurie, Commissioner of the Department of Human Services.
Melissa Hortman, Speaker of the Minnesota House.
Kathy Tenbrook, State Director to Prevent and End Homelessness.
Michelle Smith, Minnesota HUD Field Office Director.
Justin Vorbach, Southwest Minnesota Continuum of Care Coordinator.
Christy Blankenship, the Interim Chief Operating Officer for the Southwest Minnesota Housing Partnership.
Jen Lamb, Supportive Housing Specialist with the Southwest Minnesota Housing Partnership.
Angela Larson, Family Services Director for United Community Action Partnership.
Janine Antony, Case Manager at United Community Action.
And I'm Courtney, and I'm a consumer.
Thank you so much. And what we're going to do is I'm just going to ask a question, and folks can answer as you feel moved to do so. But one of the questions that I have about this work is as you're able to identify and quickly engage folks to start bringing people together, resources together to get folks housed. I know that building trust amongst partners, but also amongst consumers is really critical. Could you talk about how you approach that work to quickly identify folks and engage, but also build trust to reach this milestone?
Well, that's interesting that you said that, because when Courtney and I were visiting, one of the things that we were talking about is that we have to earn respect and earn trust, and it has to be both ways. And so our consumers have been for a very long time not able to trust. And so we have to take baby steps, and we have to be good listeners, and we have to be supportive of them. But it's not a one-way street. So I always have told my consumers that you get out of the programming and out of the assistance that you need as much as you put in. So if they don't partner up with me, I don't have a magic wand. And so we have to work together to resolve this. And that, I think, has been something that's been very helpful with working with the consumers that we do.
I turn it over to Speaker Hortman.
Well, this is a really impressive accomplishment, and as the Lieutenant Governor mentioned and Commissioner Ho mentioned, we have a significant increase in homelessness at this point in time. And I'm wondering what lessons you think we can take back to spread this success to other areas of the state. I really appreciated that Justin listed all the individual names of the people, because I know this didn't just happen, right? There was a ton of effort, and my takeaways are it was a lot of people who were committed over a long period of time. But other than that, if you could share some things that you think we can take back to the state legislature, take back to the cities, and see if we can use some of what you've learned to help some of the serious problems we're having in bigger marketplaces.
I can start. One of the things I think has happened over time is we've really worked hard in rural Minnesota to work together in every way that we can. We have really limited resources, so we can never ever duplicate services. We have to work together and really coordinate and collaborate, and I think that's one of the great things about our area, is because we know each other by name, we know when people are going on vacation, we know who's retiring. We really are a close-knit group, and I think over time we really increased our capacity to serve people. 15 years ago we had just a couple of case managers covering 5 counties, and I think we have more than 10 now, because we have so many different services that we've taken on over time, whether it's developing supportive housing or it's increasing shelter units, and we work really hard to try to have innovative solutions that are community-based, that help with the long term. So we have examples of communities coming together to build a shelter program from the ground up. They engaged with Community Action or other partners to try to make it happen, but it was really community driven, and I think those partnerships really make a big difference.
So it really is, I'm going to build off your partnership discussion. So, you know, Rick Goodman was our founding CEO, and he built our organization on those partnerships. And those are partnerships with communities, partnerships with national, state, and local funders, partnerships with service providers, property management, and the local agencies. So it was these long-term partnerships that brought us here today to celebrate this, and will continue to help us maintain a functional zero for chronic homelessness. And without the coordination between the service providers, the property management, and the owners, the housing first model wouldn't work. You know, if we're not talking to each other and really working and understanding that stabilization is really the first key for these families, and that's with housing, you know, no one's going to be successful. So it takes a deep commitment from everyone involved to serve those that are hardest to house. those are the ones that are most in need, and to support the families and individuals to reach the housing stability.
So, in terms of what the state can do to replicate this, I would talk about the current shelter resources that come from the state and from the federal government, and the need for more of those in terms of providing a place to stabilize. And also with that is the need for service dollars. I believe there's something working its way through the state about the Centers for Medicaid and Medicare allowing service dollars because housing is health care. The Housing First model, which I think is being used statewide, but essentially what it says is it used to be get your life together and then we'll help you get housing, but now Housing First says we'll try and get you into housing and then you can get your life together. Continued state bonding dollars and tax credits to develop affordable housing and supportive housing, housing infrastructure bonds, a well-run homeless management information system, and continued support from HUD. I think all the other COCs are doing what we've done and continue to do in terms of having well-advertised entry points, a common assessment tool, statewide data sharing, matching clients with the right amount of assistance, but not more than they need to keep resources used as efficiently as possible. And then we've recently started a landlord risk mitigation fund, which provides a little more security to landlords who are nervous about renting to people who don't have the best housing or credit or criminal histories. Our weekly case management of the people, we have a list of who's homeless, and we talk every week about what we're doing to house them. So unfortunately, statewide, and when I looked at the numbers for the chronically homeless that we helped, there are racial disparities. So for example, while Native Americans are 1% of Minnesota's population, they're 8% of the homeless population, 8 or 9. African Americans in our COC were 25% of the chronically homeless, while they're only 6% of the Minnesota population, and they're 35% of the state homeless population. So these are all things that we're doing and need to continue to do to spread this movement across Minnesota.
Well, thank you and congratulations first off. This is truly impressive and I'm glad to be here. You know, the Department of Human Services is a partner, and we do a lot of the service dollars, and we do have a state plan amendment sitting with CMS right now, hoping to be able to bring those service dollars. Right now they're available in our disability waivers, but not through our standard Medicaid program. And so by coming in through the state plan amendment door, we will be able to use those both transition dollars and housing sustaining services to help many more people. And we're looking forward to being able to bring those new resources to the street. But I really want to dive down on the partnership and try to figure out how you develop those partnerships, because what we experience over and over is that, like, the ones that are putting up some of the fiscal, some of the money to do this don't always see the returns on their book of business, and it gets really hard to build these partnerships when people get defensive about their spend in this area, and then the benefits accrue on someone else's sheet. And so how do you break some of those barriers and really work to build these partnerships in a way that we understand that to not solve this costs everyone's bottom line in a way that doesn't work for any of our systems and certainly fails the people that we're really trying to serve. So if you have some specific ideas about how to build those partnerships against some of those goals.
I'm thinking Christy and Jen and Angela might be the best people to respond to this, if you're comfortable. Hopefully at least one of you is.
Well, I'll start. So when we talked about the partnerships, obviously those are partnerships with the funders. And we couldn't have created the affordable housing units that we have without our ongoing long-term relationship with Minnesota Housing, with Greater Minnesota Housing Fund, with HUD and USDA Rural Development. And so they are the ones that bring that money on the forefront to help us do the development. Without the low-income housing tax credit program, without the challenge fund, the housing trust fund, the housing infrastructure bonds, that type of funding, both, and even the amortizing of deferred debt, we can't build a unit that's going to be affordable. And then you bring in the services. So now we're bringing in DHS, and we're bringing in the HUD COC grants to help us pay for services. And so we're looking at the emergency services programs. We're looking at the supportive housing program, the long-term homeless supportive services, and the housing supports. We also get, through Minnesota Housing, you can use the Family Homeless Prevention and Assistance Program. And that works for both, and bridges, for rental assistance and rental subsidies, also through HUD and the COC grants and through USDA Rural Development. And, we know that it takes that money up front, but it's far more easier to spend it up front than to spend it on the back end, because on the back end, it just keeps accruing. I don't know how to put it on somebody else's balance sheet, but you just see the success of these families once they've stabilized, reduced healthcare costs, better attendance and performance in schools. All those things are going to pay it forward, to the community.
From the services end of things, like really getting down to the nitty-gritty with building partnerships, my role is to really be that go-between between the developer, where she's looking at the money, that's what she's focusing on, and then working with our providers who are they're focused on the individuals that they're serving. And so it's really just having that point of connection between them, having the regular conversations. We meet monthly, every other month, with some of the different programmings we have in common. We have our COC meetings on a monthly basis, so we see each other, hear each other's voices very, very regularly. And so it's just building relationships. You build relationships, you get to know somebody, even little bits about their personal life, and those just even help build that partnership and make it stronger, because you have similar goals in mind. And so it's just, we maintain those relationships, we maintain those points of contact. If we haven't had a visit, or we have COC meetings canceled or over the phone because of whether, we find some other way to make sure we're connecting with everybody, so that we're still seeing the good work that our partners are doing and still having those points of contact.
Another thing I'd like to point out too is how lucky we are to have such great partners as our funders. Minnesota Housing, DHS, the Office of Economic Opportunity, huge partners for us. Coalition for the Homeless, HUD, all those folks work together, and it's not just the money. It's the folks that work with the money and work as technical assistance partners. They bring us together, as often as they can, so we can learn from each other. But even as we look at changes over time when people retire or leave. When I first started doing this work, they connected me with a mentor to teach me how to run these programs. And since that time, I've been able to serve as a mentor for other people. And I think that's the easiest way to learn, is by connecting people throughout the state. And those partnerships are invaluable. Things like having the different units throughout the service area. We have a large geographic area, and so we have to find unique ways to connect with each other, whether it's coming together for meetings or using technology.
I would just add that the DHS, the county workers are a great partner in terms of the common
the common application and the financial workers, connecting people to MFIP, which I'll remind you hasn't gone up in 33 years.
Noted.
And I know you're working on that. So we're grateful to the county social worker partnerships as well.
Right, I'll acknowledge,
You know, they made us find pictures of ourselves from 1986. It's been a little painful. But it really does make the point that MFIP really does need.
I don't think I've seen yours.
Yeah,
There's a mullet situation.
wow. Yeah, and I will say that it's been incredible working with the governor's office on the original budget proposal. It's the largest starting position from a governor ever on housing. And I know you said it's not just housing, but with Speaker Hartman here, or it's not just money, but it is money. And so with Speaker Hartman here, I want to make really clear, it is money. It's what we do with it after we get it, but it is money. Courtney, if you're open to just providing some advice in terms of, in your own experience, what didn't work that perpetuated your homelessness, and what worked differently that got you out of it?
I spent a majority of my adult life with children, homeless throughout the state of Minnesota. I've jumped from community to community, trying to find resources, and it wasn't until I got out here, and actually through programming with, well, it was Western Community Action back then, but I was on the Head Start, Early Head Start program, and facing homelessness again, and ended up in the refuge, and they suggested me towards looking into getting some help for housing from that. I had tried the county, and there was no resources available for someone in my unique situation. Multiple children, can't work, disabled, and jumped through every hoop you can imagine, and there wasn't a set foundation of just knowing how to find those resources. And over the last 5 years, being a consumer, they really have brought together a way to find the resources, and I think that was something that wasn't easily accessible in some of the other communities I had tried to find help in. I mean, there's resources out there, but they're not as well known for people that are sleeping on the streets or jumping from shelter to shelter or couch hopping even. And some of them are only accessible if you can stay there for 30 days. Well, you face, when being homeless, if you don't have a shelter for 30 days, you kind of got to move around. And it makes it impossible to find the help. And so coming out here, they really have pulled it together where there is such a tight-knit community, not just with the UCAP staff that do the permanent supportive housing program that I am on, but they have Early Head Start showing resources to families that are struggling. They have the county suggesting, you know, hey, this is not the last stop, you can try this resource. And it wasn't until they were able to pull some of that together that I think really kind of pulled it together for the community to be able to find solutions.
Great. I want to suggest maybe that if you have another question, we can do kind of just a quicker round of follow-up questions, Lieutenant Governor. Is there something else you'd like to ask today?
I think the question that I would like to ask is, as we are all sitting here, and you've alluded to it, but what would be helpful as you have the Speaker of the House, you have 2 commissioners from our administration, a representative from HUD, someone from the governor's office. What do we need to know? What do we need to know? And I think, Courtney, you started to really identify it. But as we are making these decisions, because we know that this is about real people, it's not facts, figures, and statistics, and I think it's a lot easier to deny someone dignity when you don't have to associate a human person and face with it. So I'm wondering if you just say, like, at the bottom line, what do we need to know and what do we need to carry with us as we are making decisions, especially in the coming weeks
that will dramatically impact people's lives.
Well, I'm thinking that some might see all of these agencies and see dollar signs and think this is expensive. So I would suggest what you need to know, and maybe you already do, is that while it does cost money, the cost of not ending homelessness costs more when you look at emergency rooms and detox and treatment and jail. Even shelter, it costs more to shelter someone than to house them. Anyone else?
You know, my only comment on this would be, you know, and like Jennifer said, it is about the money. It is about making the funding and adequate funding available for all the programs, whether it's, you know, for the development of the units, whether it's for the services that are being provided. You know, it's a great need. You know, and I know the governor has promoted a huge increase in housing infrastructure bonds, which is one great source to develop this type of housing. So to continue to look at really increasing those sources and making sure we've got the tools available to continue the work that we're doing.
And just lastly, we talked too about how important it is to provide services, not just the dollars to house people, but also the services. And that helps people who are already chronically homeless end their homelessness. But services are important as earlier interventions as well. So it would be better if we could help people never be chronically homeless in the first place. So providing those services with the shelter dollars helps people make sure that that might be their last time ever, first and last time being homeless.
Angela, that plays right into the question that I had. I noticed that both in January of 2017 and in January of 2018, you counted 0 people in the continuum of care region who were experiencing chronic homelessness. But I'm assuming that there's work that you have been doing all along to make sure that if you identify anybody in the meantime who is chronically homeless or somebody who has been homeless for a long time that might become homeless for a year or longer, that you're doing something. Just describe a little bit about what the ongoing effort looks like. This isn't one and done, right? What does the ongoing effort look like?
I think one of the ways that we really work to do that is through our coordinated entry system. That's something that I think has really helped us make sure that we're keeping track of the folks that come and need our services. And while the resources that we have don't meet 100% of the needs that we have, at least we have a way to prioritize as a region and help people get connected to the services that they need where they want to receive them. That, you know, we talked, I think, when it first came out that, you know, we don't have very many service providers. What are we going to coordinate ourselves, you know? But over time, I think that we have seen a true benefit for that, and we're all working even better together as a team.
You know, one question that I have too, you know, in terms of the service dollars, we also provide a lot of service dollars to our health systems, and I'm wondering how much partnership there's been, you know, as you end chronic homelessness, hopefully we can get more upstream even and try to get our health systems working very collaboratively with our social services and identifying needs before there's even, you know, prevent homelessness that first time. So I mean, I know that it should be, you know, rare, brief and non-recurring, but it should be prevented too. And so I know you guys have Southern Prairie, we work very collaboratively with at the department. Is that partnership strong? Is that helping? And they're supposed to be working on the social determinants of health, housing a big piece of that, and, you know, trying to do a lot of the prevention work. Are they a good partner in the work that you do? And
I have met with that group, and it's a place where there's potential. We haven't maximized everything we can do to partner with them. One thing we have done, which has helped, is the integration of the MNsure navigators. So Jeannie, among her many hats, is a MNsure navigator, which helps connect. So while she's helping people with their housing, she's also helping people with their health care.
So one of the first things when individuals come into, and I'm visiting with them, we can do MNsure application for health care immediately. We can also help with the food support outreach. We do food support applications. So there's many different types of hats, but the first thing that you have to do is to identify what is the most important thing. And sometimes it's the housing. And so we have to get them in the housing, then we work on that. Those are the steps that we take while providing the case management. And then it just goes right back that they have to work with me. You know, I just don't put them in shelter and then they fall off the face of the earth, because I can't do that without their partnership. So yes, we work very closely with DHS.
I'm just wondering what the doorway looks like. You know, you wonderful people have these great partnerships and you're able to help Courtney and people like her, but how do people find you? When I was a legal aid lawyer and early in my legal career, people could find us, then we could connect them with emergency assistance and food shelf resources, but it was kind of like they needed a decoder ring to, in some cases, find us. It was the filing of the unlawful detainer or something. And I'm just wondering, what does the doorway look like? How do people find you?
So the first federal legislation related to homelessness was in the 80s, the McKinney-Vento. And then it was updated in 2009 with the Hearth Act, which mandated a coordinated entry system be integrated, which took some time. It was, you know, as all change does, there's resistance, but we now have well-advertised entry points. There's, so we have radio ads, we have posters around the community and grocery stores and laundromats and food shelves. And they tell people can call 211, we have the Help with United Way, who can tell them where they need to go based on whether they're a domestic violence situation or a youth homeless or prevention. We also have some agencies, UCAP and the Housing Partnership, that do foreclosure prevention. So that's another doorway that's advertised. And we advertise, fortunately we have case managers that speak Somali and Hmong and Spanish, so that's advertised in those languages as well.
I'm so proud to be here today. This is incredible. Thank you. Thank you for your hard work, Courtney, and giving you advance notice that you deserve the last word, so you're going to get it. So just take a moment to think about that. After you bring it home with what it is that you want us to know, we're going to break, and a couple of us here are going to take some questions from the press. But before we do that, I just really want to thank this community for modeling what it means to do it right. And the openness to change how you worked or thought about your work, but to really leverage the new resources that came into the community and do what the research was telling us made sense, and to do it with trust and love and collaboration and partnership, and probably a little bit of frustration that gets worked out every now and then in between. But it's just really incredibly phenomenal to hear your story today, to be able to tell it and to spread it. It just gives me so much hope that we can get this done safely. So, Courtney, you want to bring us home?
That's a lot of pressure. I guess I don't know exactly what to say. I couldn't be where I am today without Jeannie, and I wanted to fire her. I was not a huge fan of Jeannie. It definitely took a lot of work, not just from her and her team that she reports to and they report to and whatnot, but work on the opposite end. I wouldn't have gotten nearly as much out of the program if I hadn't worked the program. Sorry.
That's good. That's good. That's good.
The resources are limited. I mean, there's not resources for every person in every situation. Someone in my position doesn't qualify for, let's say, MFIP, you know. So having GD kind of help navigate, there's food shelf, there's food sport, it's not just MFIP, there's other programs. Having her to delegate, this is where to go, this is how to do it, saved my life, saved my children's lives. You know, I couldn't have done it without her. And to be able to be here today, it's amazing.
Great, and I think we're happy to go up to the mic and take some questions if there's any media here. Jessica, do we have some folks that want to do some questions here? Great.
I don't know if there's anyone with questions.